I couldn't breathe when the cops pulled up to my door. Karen had actually reported me for refusing to hand over my own car to her son. But the second the FBI director stepped in, the truth crushed her faster than the sirens did. "Let me take you back." The old chair gave a long, comfortable creak under me, the same sound it made years ago when my father leaned back with a glass of iced tea. I had kept it on the porch for that reason. It steadied me. From where I sat, my new SUV glinted in the late afternoon sun, a black mirror in the driveway. The neighborhood smelled like somebody's ribs, sweet smoke curling over the cul-de-sac. Karen's sunglasses caught the sun at an angle that made them look like tiny courtroom scales. She stood with her clipboard angled toward me, colored tabs sticking out in a rainbow that promised trouble. At the same moment, the HOA gate beeped twice as a delivery truck pushed through its warning tone, echoing off the siding. Around here, every sound seemed to announce a new rule. I wanted nothing more than to keep the evening quiet, let the day end with the steady whir of cicadas and the car's glossy reflection. My goal had been the same since we moved in: keep my head down, keep the peace, and hold on to what's mine. Greensboro summers have a heaviness that presses on you like the humidity knows your secrets. In 2015, the subdivision was just old enough to be broken in, but new enough for neighbors to introduce themselves with those polite smiles that turn formal the moment bylaws get mentioned. You could share a plate of ribs at 4 and be reported for mailbox height at 6. I hosed the dust from the driveway while Martha clipped dead leaves from her geraniums. Dylan circled close, his sneakers scuffing the curb, his eyes never leaving the SUV. "Nice ride," he said. Half smirk, half dare. "When do I get to take it for a spin?" I laughed lightly, the way you do when a child asks for the moon. "Not a chance, Dylan. This car doesn't leave the driveway with anyone but me behind the wheel." He tilted his head like I had just spoken nonsense. "My mom's on the board. You should be a better neighbor." His gaze slid down the polished chrome as if already claiming it. I wiped the water from my hands, tried to keep my voice even. "That's not how borrowing works. Tell your mom this isn't a community rental lot." His eyes narrowed, and he jogged off toward Karen, who was already crossing the street. She moved with that quick, upright stride that said she wasn't here for small talk. Clipboard under one arm, sunglasses reflecting the SUV, she gave me a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. "This community thrives on sharing." She began tapping the board with her pen. I straightened, still holding the damp towel. "So do boundaries." Her mouth twitched, the smile turning to something sharper. She glanced over her shoulder, making sure 2 neighbors could hear. "I'll bring it to the board," she said, crisp enough to cut the air. From across the cul-de-sac, blinds shifted. A pair of eyes blinked out, then vanished. Martha cleared her throat softly, the signal that I should not take the bait. We ate dinner quietly, the grill smoke still hanging over the street. I told myself the boy was just spoiled, that Karen was just fishing. But when the sky finally turned navy and porch lights snapped on one by one, my phone buzzed. Subject: courtesy. Notice: potential non-compliance. Exterior items. I tapped it open. The HOA letterhead glowed blue in the light of the porch lamp. The watermark ran faintly behind the words official and impersonal. They cited possible concerns regarding driveway use and exterior presentation. No details, just the language of suspicion. I read it twice. My pulse ticked like a metronome in my ears. It wasn't about a car ride, it was about control. Martha leaned on the doorframe. "Already?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Already." The printer in the study began to hum, spooling the message into paper. As the sheet slid out, the footer caught my eye. Hearing procedures. Second 4.3. I had never read those before. The meeting hall buzzed faintly like a beehive losing its rhythm. Fluorescent tubes blinked above us, their hum mixing with the shuffle of folding chairs. On the table up front, a tower of violation slips leaned against the small wooden gavel. Nobody touched the potluck cookies cooling on the side table, they sat like bait. On the cork bulletin board, a fresh flyer announced Community Standards Refresh. The pin holding it tilted sideways. Karen, already in place, adjusted the paper to perfect eye level, smoothing its corners as if she owned the wall itself. I had come here telling myself to stay calm, to ask questions, not fight. My goal was simple: learn the rules even if they seemed written to trip me. Martha sat beside me, her fingers giving my sleeve a quiet squeeze each time I shifted too much in my chair. It was spring 2017, and the neighborhood was buzzing with mowers and graduation parties. Inside this hall, though, air hung thick. A few neighbors leaned forward, curious more than supportive, waiting to see how the evening's spectacle would play out. When the agenda turned to me, Karen smiled with a sweetness sharpened by procedure. "We've had several concerns raised regarding driveway presentation and exterior items," she said. Her colored tabs fluttered as she flipped pages quickly. "Which bylaw?" I asked, voice steady. I wanted the number, not the flavor. She read in a quick, clipped tone, skipping explanations. The legal jargon rolled off like code I couldn't parse at that speed. I caught Martha's sigh under her breath. One board member typed into the minutes. His monotone voice repeated my words. Mr. Maris inquired about citations. Then he paused, hesitating on my name. "Is," he said, mispronouncing it flat. I corrected softly Maris. He nodded, but didn't fix it. On the screen, my identity sat misspelled, like I didn't quite belong here. The conversation moved on without me. Neighbors whispered. The chair of the board leaned back then forward, tapping a pen. Finally, he spoke. Mr. Maris is advised his tone can be perceived as unneighborly. His words carried across the hall louder than the hum of the lights. Pens stopped moving. Faces lifted. The air pinched tight. I swallowed the reply that sat hot on my tongue. Martha's hand closed firmly around my sleeve, reminding me. Quiet strength sometimes outlasts shouting. When the meeting adjourned, the scrape of chairs on linoleum echoed like judgments. I walked out into the soft spring dusk. Pollen floated in the light from the street lamps. On my garage door, yellow paper clung by 2 strips of tape. Notice, garage aesthetic non-compliance. The tape edges caught tiny flecks of pollen-speckled gold against the warning. I peeled it off, slowly, folded it, slid it into my folder. My driveway looked the same as always, but the paper said otherwise. Back home, as I set the notice down, the laptop pinged. Another email, dropped in bold. Escalation path, formal warning possible. I hovered, my mouse opened it. Read the vague phrasing that carried weight without detail. I didn't reply. The cursor blinked in the quiet house waiting for me to fight. I closed the lid instead. The storm had rinsed the street clean and left the air smelling of wet asphalt and pine. Puddles mirrored the porch lights up and down the cul-de-sac. When I stepped outside with 2 mugs, Rick was already at the fence with his dented steel thermos and a look that said he'd been waiting for weather like this his whole life. He tapped the rim of the thermos against the picket, nodding toward Karen's side of the street. People who over-tab, he said, usually overreach. I handed him a mug. "You've seen this before? Different neighborhood, same hymn book." He motioned toward my back porch table where the half-open 401k statement lay under a smooth stone. One corner had a hard diagonal crease where I'd closed it too fast. He noticed everything. "You want to defend yourself without becoming their show. Paper and patience," he added, sipping. We sat with the quiet drip of gutter water and the tick of cooling deck boards. A finch tested the rail, dark eye bright in the gray light. I told him about the last meeting, the mispronounced name in the minutes the flyer adjusted to eye level, the yellow notice catching pollen like it was proud of itself. My voice stayed even, the way you talk through a splinter you can't quite dig out. "First thing," he said, setting the thermos down, "you archive every email. Not keep them, archive them. Save each as a PDF with the date in the file name. Don't trust a folder named HOA stuff. Trust the calendar." He pulled a spiral notebook from his jacket and drew boxes like shelves. Year, month, subject, attachment. You don't need to win the argument. You need to win the timeline. Inside, I opened the laptop. The storm smell followed us through the screen door. Rick stood behind my chair the way instructors do when they mean well but want the keystrokes exactly right. We created folders by year, then month. I started from the first courtesy notice, clicking print. Save as PDF. He told me to add a prefix, 2015 to 0614, courtesy notice, exterior, items, PDF. The file names began to look like index cards lining themselves on a narrow shelf in my head. Now, he said, pull their bylaws. I searched our HOA portal. The PDF had that same pale watermark as the emails. I scrolled while Rick scanned faster than I could. "Stop," he said, pressing a finger to the screen. Back up a page. Section numbers marched down the page. 6.2, then 6.4. No, 6.3. He didn't smile, but his eyes did. They'll tell you the heart of the rule is clear. Courts like bones. Missing sections are bones. I took a photo of the screen with my phone, then printed the page and drew a small bracket in the margin the way I used to when I audited systems for a living. The printer sang its private little song and slid the sheet onto the tray, still warm. Second thing, he said, film conditions, not speeches, timestamps, pan slow. Narration makes it about you, video makes it about facts. He led me outside to the curb. The street was still beaded with rain. "Start here," he said, pointing to the edge of my driveway. "Mailbox height, house number visibility, sidewalk clearance. Give them the uninteresting truth. That's what survives hearings." I held the phone landscape, let the camera adjust, and started a slow pan from the mailbox down the driveway to the porch. The Finch had moved to the gutter, watching us with the casual offense of a tiny landlord. Rick had me hold a tape measure against the mailbox post, then he photographed the readout next to my house number. "No color commentary," he repeated. "If you slip, include it anyway. Honest clumsiness plays better than clean staging." Back inside, we made folders for the videos and named them the same way. Rain clicked against the window screen. The house smelled faintly of Martha's lemon oil on the banister. She hovered in the kitchen doorway, listening, arms folded. "He's teaching me to file," I told her. She looked at the 401k statement under the stone, then at Rick. "File the important things first," she said. "I intend to," he answered with that dry, slow voice that lands like advice after it stops sounding like it. We moved to the dining table and laid out everything I'd saved since 2015. Emails, notices, photos, screenshot printouts. I printed an index and numbered the pages with a pencil. The stack leaned left like a tired tree. Rick straightened it with his palm. "Good," he said. "Lean shows weight." "Will any of this matter to them?" I asked. "Maybe not to them," he said, "but to the place above them," and he tapped the index. "It matters that your story is told in order and in ink." He slid the bylaw packet toward me again. Read the definitions section, he said slowly. I did tracing each line with a finger. Exterior items meant objects visible from the street that altered appearance or function. Temporary furnishings covered seasonal and personal items not affixed to structures. The words didn't meet cleanly in the middle. My finger stopped. The porch chair, the one my father had worked smooth with years of evenings, wasn't affixed. It didn't alter anything but my blood pressure. "Here," I said, tapping the paragraph with the tip of a pencil. "Personal heritage furnishing," I read out loud. The phrase sat right there, small as a loophole, and twice as bright once you noticed it. My mouth went dry the way it does when something shifts in your favor and you don't want to scare it off. Rick's breath came out in a soft chuckle. "They'll argue." "Intent," he said. "Let them. You've got text." Outside, a neighbor's screen door creaked. Footsteps paused, then turned back. News traveled on foot here, light as gossip and heavy as rain. We rehearsed nothing. Rick wouldn't allow it. "You don't perform this," he said. "You assemble it. If they push you, hand them a number. If they scoff you, hand them a date. If they threaten you, hand them a section." He took a paperclip from his pocket, of course he carried one, and locked the misprint page to the definitions sheet like a hinge. As afternoon thinned into early dark, I filmed one last slow pan from the sidewalk to the porch. The chair's worn arms caught a bit of lamplight, the grain lifting and settling. I wanted to pick it up and take it inside away from eyes, but leaving it where it had always been felt truer to the rule than hiding it. The video ended on the porch light halo and the street beyond, wet and still. By the time we finished labeling and saving, the storm had moved on, leaving a cool hush. Martha set out 2 bowls of stew and bread that steamed when we broke it. Rick poured a finger of coffee from his thermos and called it dessert. We didn't talk about court or judges or outcomes. We talked about the Finch and the way storms make old wood smell like a memory. The quiet felt like ballast. Dusk gathered purple at the edges. When I went to lock the front door, something thin slid along the floor and tapped my shoe. An envelope, heavy paper, the kind that knows how it's supposed to be handled. Certified mail, typed in small, sober letters. The green return card peaked like a tongue. I bent and picked it up. The seal was unbroken. The weight of it tugged at my hand. Behind me, Rick's voice was steady. "Don't open it on your feet." I nodded, set the envelope beside the index stack where the paperclip glinted, and felt the house hold its breath with me. Dylan's sneaker touched the porch chair as if he were testing a fence post. He gave it the kind of sideways nudge boys use on a dare. The leg snapped with a dry little gasp, the sound of old wood releasing a secret. Karen's arms were already folded. Her phone was open to the camera app before the leg hit the floorboard. She didn't flinch. Winter light drew a thin line across her sunglasses like a blade. Across the street, neighbors stalled at the mailboxes, keys dangling from fingers. The quiet was the kind that invites judgment. I knelt beside the chair. The cracked grain showed a pale seam where glue my father once brushed had long gone to dust. I took a photo, then another with a coin beside the split to show scale. If I breathed too hard, the broken leg wobbled like a loose truth. "Oops," Dylan said, and grinned a second too long. His smirk faltered when I didn't rise. Documenting damage, I said, mostly for my own benefit. I turned the chair on its side and eased the dowel free, the end showing a ridge of desiccated glue a little like frost. The camera shutter made its small, crisp sound. Karen's phone made a bigger one. Karen stepped closer to the bottom stair, framing the porch in a purposeful rectangle. "Recording a community downgrade," she said in the voice she used for minutes and motions. "Broken outdoor furniture visible from the street." "It was intact this morning," I said, keeping my voice even, "and it's not a fixture." She raised her eyebrows as if I'd told a joke at a memorial. "You can give your statement at the hearing, Mr. Maris." She panned from the chair to the street and back again, making sure the mailbox and house numbers were in frame like she'd been taught to prove location. A neighbor coughed. Someone's dog tags jingled. Martha stepped out behind me, her sweater wrapped tight. She didn't speak to Karen. She looked at me, a question and a warning in one glance. My breath slowed to match hers. I crouched lower and ran my finger along the split. The wood was cleanly sheared, not rotted. "Don't touch it," Karen said, as if we were in a museum. She recited toward her phone. "Owner is interfering with evidence." The word landed with a little puff of winter air. I set my phone on video and recorded a single slow sweep from the sidewalk to the porch, the chair. The break, the angle of the leg where the grain gave way. No commentary. The timestamp glowed in the lower corner. When I finished, I placed the broken piece on the porch table next to the certified envelope we still hadn't opened. The green return card peaked like an accusation. "We'll want the porch clear of damaged items," Karen added. "It reflects on the community." She paused, letting the phrase hang as if polite. "The board meets tonight." "That was fast," Martha said. "We take standards seriously." Karen's smile arrived late and left early. She turned the phone off with a neat press of her thumb and guided Dylan away with a touch at his elbow, the gesture more stage direction than affection. When they were gone, I heard breath. I didn't know I'd been holding. I took 3 photos of the porch boards where the leg fell faint marks in the gray paint, then the chair's seat from above. The wood had the shallow shine time gives not any finish you could buy now. The camera caught small ridges where my father's hands had smoothed it over years. I didn't say anything because there was nothing useful to say. Martha picked up the broken leg with both hands. It looked heavier when she held it the way verdicts look heavier when they're read out loud. "We can fix it," she said, and the hope in her voice was practical, not pleading. "We will," I answered. The winter light made the dust in the air look like tiny decisions. In the afternoon, I uploaded the stills and the short video to a new folder, 2021-02, Porch Chair Chair Breakage. I added a copy of the bylaw definitions page next to the misprint on section numbers. The file names began to look like a tight chronology on a long shelf. I didn't try to shape a story. I arranged facts in order and let the stamps and timestamps do the talking. The neighbors drifted in and out of view all day, checking mail again for nothing. That's how news moves here, by mistake and repetition. When the cold sharpened, I went inside. The house held a careful hush, the balance that comes when 2 people agree not to speak until they won't regret what they say. At dusk, my laptop chimed. The subject line arrived like a drumbeat: public hearing, Eldon Maris. A case number followed, bold, unapologetic. I clicked. The body of the email was brief and blank of warmth. Notice of hearing, pursuant to Second 4.3. The board will convene to consider matters related to exterior presentation and community standards. Please see attached hearingprocedures.pdf for format and time limits. Attached, the PDF carried the familiar watermark our subdivision's name faded under legal font. A list of steps showed who spoke when, where exhibits were submitted, how objections were handled. I printed it and underlined the only sentence that mattered: members may present documentary evidence. That was the whole point. For a moment, the printer sound filled the room the way wind fills a screen door, insistently ordinary. The page slid out warm, leaving a faint line of toner on my fingertip. I set it beneath the misprint sheet, and the definitions copy the stack, building a spine. The temptation to call Rick right then tugged at me, but I made myself do one more thing. I walked back to the porch and adjusted the small camera under the eave so its field of view took in the steps and the first edge of the driveway. I checked the microSD and copied the day's clip to my laptop. The footage showed Dylan's shoe enter frame hesitate and give that casual push. The chair moved a half-inch and answered with the dry gasp I'd heard in my bones. Facts don't get offended, they just sit. Martha came to the doorway, arms folded, the broken leg leaning against her hip like a cane no one wanted. You going to send that to Rick? In a minute, I said. The video finished copying. I watched it once without sound, just to be sure. Then I opened the sharing window, set the permissions to view only, and typed his email. My thumb hovered above the trackpad the way it had over the certified envelope. I breathed out slowly and clicked Share. The little arrow icon turned blue and then gray again. Outside, the winter light thinned to evening. Somewhere down the block, a mailbox closed with a hollow, certain click. At midnight, the house was quiet except for the lamp on my desk. Its cone of light spread across a mountain of paper notices stacked like shingles yellowed minutes photographs with penciled dates. In the glow, the cursor blinked on my screen, steady as a dare. Martha leaned against the doorframe in her robe. "If you send it," she whispered, "you can't pull it back." I didn't answer. The study smelled of toner and paper dust. A folder with the county seal embossed on its cover sat open beside me, waiting for me to give it purpose. The USB drive that held the porch camera video rested like a small, loaded witness. I had rehearsed this moment in silence for weeks, and still my hand shook. I pulled up the first file, the clip of Dylan nudging the chair, labeled Exhibit A. It showed the sneaker toe, the half-inch slide, the dry crack of wood. No commentary, just a timestamp. The cursor skimmed across the video as if even the computer wanted to look away. Exhibit B, the bylaws, with the missing 6.3. I highlighted the skip in yellow and drew a margin arrow on the printed copy. Quartz, Rick had said, like bones. Missing bones show. Exhibit C, the definitions of exterior items and temporary furnishings. I had circled personal heritage furnishing in pen, the ink blotched where my hand paused too long. Next to it, a photo of the chair hole from back in 2015. I slid that into the stack, the memory anchoring the loophole. I scrolled through the folder tree one more time. Each file named like a heartbeat, 2015-06-14, courtesy notice.pdf. 2017-04-23 minutes mispronounce. PDF. 2021-02-12, porch chair breakage. MP4. Evidence lined up neat as soldiers. My hand hovered above the trackpad. Sweat dotted the edge of the mousepad where I had held too long. I clicked send. The screen pulsed, then returned to idle. A faint chime confirmed what the cursor had dared me to do. I exhaled, shoulders slumping. Then came the printer's hum, low at first, then steady as certified copies slid out one by one. The heat of fresh toner smelled faintly metallic. I stacked each page into the county-sealed folder, pressing the edges so they squared. When the last page lay there, I folded the flap and smoothed the adhesive strip. Martha stepped closer. Her hand brushed mine as we pressed the flap down together. The envelope thudded onto the desk heavier than its weight, carrying every year since 2015. I filled out the green card, my handwriting deliberate, each letter standing upright. Return, receipt, requested. The pen caught slightly on the gloss. For the first time in months, I felt taller than the chair behind me. I carried the envelope to the front door, the house dark except for the porch light. The night smelled of wet grass and asphalt cooling from the day's sun. I set the envelope in the outgoing tray and let the door click closed behind me. Sleep came in patches. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the cursor blinking, asking again if I meant it. Each time I answered with the sound of paper sliding into a tray. Morning light came pale and sharp. The sound that woke me was not the alarm, but a voice on the porch. Karen's voice. "You dragged outsiders in, you'll regret it," she shrieked, every syllable sharp enough to cut the air. I opened the blinds in time to see her pacing at the edge of the steps, phone in hand, sunglasses flashing like a signal. She jabbed the air toward the mailbox where the envelope had already gone. "This is harassment. You think the county cares about your little chair? You'll see." Her voice carried across the cul-de-sac. Curtains shifted. A neighbor's dog barked twice, then stopped as if told to hush. Martha put a hand on my arm. "Steady. Let her shout." Karen spun once more, her coat whipping, then stormed back toward her house. The echo of her shoes on the pavement was the only punctuation. The envelope was already on its way. The county courtroom felt smaller than the HOA hall, but heavier, as though the oak benches had been designed to carry judgment in their grain. Light came through tall windows in sheets dust motes, spinning like they too were waiting their turn. I sat at the front table, papers stacked neat, my notes trembling in my hands. Rick leaned closer, straightening his tie. "Remember, truth doesn't shout," he said. Voice slow as gravel. "It weighs." The judge entered. Everyone rose, the shuffle of shoes on wood, sounding like an old hymn. The flag above the bench hung motionless as if it had decided the air should wait too. When the judge gave the nod, the microphone clicked alive, that sharp little pop like a finger tapping glass. Karen sat across the aisle, smile, stretched eyes too bright. Her folder bulged with the tabs I knew well. Miguel, called as a witness, perched uneasy on the bench behind her, his shoulders drawn in. He looked younger than I remembered, but maybe that was just honesty showing. The clerk read the case. My name came first correctly, pronounced this time. A faint relief ran through me. I wondered if anyone else heard it. The judge asked for testimony. Rick stood. His slow steps to the witness stand were measured as if he were balancing a scale with each one. He placed his hand on the bylaws packet, the one with the pale watermark, and opened it to the section numbers. He held it up. Section 6.2, he said, finger landing on the line. Then, Section 6.4. There is no 6.3. The judge's brow furrowed. The county seal stamped on the exhibit sat crisp in the corner. Rick let silence weigh the point before he spoke again. If they enforce rules that skip sections, they enforce what doesn't exist. That is not community. That is invention. Karen shifted. A tab flicked out of her folder, bent under her hand. Next came Miguel. He walked stiff like someone stepping into a pool they couldn't quite see the bottom of. The bailiff swore him in, and his voice caught on the last word, but he nodded to finish. Tell us what you saw the judge said. Miguel's hands twisted together. I was walking to the mailbox, he began, eyes on the floor. I saw Dylan push his foot against the porch chair. It cracked. He laughed. Rick pressed play on the video. The sneaker appeared, the nudge, the dry gasp. The timestamp blinked in the corner. The sound of wood splitting echoed in the high-ceilinged room. A whisper rolled through the bench's neighbors' reporters, whoever had come to see what community law looked like outside a cul-de-sac. Karen shot up from her chair. That video is taken out of context. The judge lifted a hand. Sit down, Ms. Halstead. Her smile returned thinner now, and she sank back. The county's attorney stepped forward with questions about funds. Records show expenditures labeled as special enforcement. Please clarify their purpose. Karen's mouth opened, but the words stumbled. They were necessary. Miscellaneous legal review? The judge leaned forward. For what bylaw exactly? She shuffled the tabs, flipping too quickly. Paper edges whispered like dry leaves. No page arrived. The silence landed heavier than any accusation. I looked at Rick. He nodded, once steady, like a teacher watching a student solve a problem aloud. The judge tapped the gavel not to end, but to punctuate. Effective immediately, he said, Ms. Halstead is removed from the Homeowners Association Board. The record will reflect misuse of authority, improper enforcement, and failure to provide accurate documentation. The words filled the room with finality the way water fills a jar. Then came the bang of the gavel, hard this time, sharp enough to make the benches tremble. Karen's face flushed. She stood, voice cracking. This isn't over. She yelled, the sound ricocheting under the flag thin and furious. The gavel echoed again, louder than her words. The bailiff stepped closer, and the shouting thinned into silence. The chair stood steady again on my porch. Its leg rejoined the seam, faint as a healed scar. Glue had dried smooth, sanded flush so the grain caught light like nothing had ever broken. When I sat, the wood gave a low, honest creak, the sound of balance returning. Across the cul-de-sac, kids raced their bikes free, arcs of color across the pavement. No sunglasses flashing, no clipboard angled like a weapon. The street had its own rhythm again, ordinary, and that was the victory. The smoke of oak charcoal drifted from the community grills. It carried sweetness into the humid air, mingling with laughter and the scrape of folding tables. On the bulletin board by the pool gate, a single sheet caught my eye. Amended June 2024. Beneath the charter clause now read clear, stripped of vagueness, section numbers intact. Neighbors stopped to read it, nodding, then moved on toward the food tables. Martha's smile was lighter than I'd seen in years, the kind that comes when worry unclenches. She set down a bowl of potato salad, dusted her hands, and joined me on the porch for a moment of quiet before the crowd drew us in. Rick raised a paper cup from across the lawn, his nod short but full of approval. One by one, neighbors approached. Some I had spoken to only in clipped greetings before. Tonight their handshakes lingered. They asked about the chair, about the repair, about the barbecue recipe Martha had perfected. I pointed toward the bulletin board once or twice. That correction, I said, means more than any win I could have asked for. They understood. The chair held steady under me as conversation flowed around. Children circled the lawn, their laughter punctuating the pauses. The ink squeak of a pen carried from the folding table near the board members. Karen sat there, shoulders squared but eyes cast down. She signed the resignation line, the Navy dragging a moment longer than it should have. The sound seemed louder than the chatter, and when the page slid forward, soft applause broke from the crowd, not raucous, just firm, like a door closing with intention. She glanced up once. Her eyes landed on me, then dropped to the chair. The recognition flickered the wood she had called broken now, whole now, stronger where it had once split. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She looked away first. The night moved on. Plates clattered, drinks poured, music low from a neighbor's speaker. I stayed on the porch, iced tea, sweating in my hand. The chair didn't wobble. It welcomed weight and gave nothing away. I whispered low enough only I could hear. Some doors slam shut no matter how hard entitlement knocks. And the chair, faithful in its creak, agreed. The last clang of the HOA gate faded into memory, and oak smoke from the summer barbecue drifted soft across our street. On my porch, the chair once split now held firm under me, the wood warm from the day's sun. Justice isn't loud. It's steady, and sometimes it arrives with a pen scratch and neighbors finally nodding in agreement. Together, we mended more than rules. We cut fees, rewrote the charter, and made room for trust again. If your block's ever been weighed down by notices and fines, tell me, when did your neighbors stand tall and set it right?